Hello, everyone. As you're coming in, if you'd like to tell us where you're tuning in from, let us know what brought you here today. That'd be great. Um, I believe the chat should be enabled. If it's not, then I'm not sure why. But it'll just take a couple of minutes for folks to come in. Oh, the chat is disabled. Sorry about that, folks. I will get that back on at some point. Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much for letting me know about that. Yes, we will leave the Q&A open for questions. If you've already come in having read the book and have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. We'll be able to answer them later on, or at least Mike and Tony will. But I will be assisting with the questions. We're about the halfway point with folks coming in. We're expecting a large audience tonight, which is really awesome. And I'm sure we have people from all over the country today. Looking forward to hearing Mike's story. I'll just go ahead and get started and let the other folks catch up with us. Hello, I'm Omar Acevedo. I'm the Literary Program Coordinator at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm delighted to host tonight's program, A Billion Years, My Escape from a Life in the Highest Ranks of Scientology. Our virtual programs are produced in part with support honoring the late Frank Lord. We are happy to honor his memory with these programs. We are also incredibly grateful to the Wish You Well Foundation and Connecticut Public WNPR for supporting all of our virtual programs. Now, let me tell you more about tonight's program. We are welcoming Mike Rinder and Tony Ortega for a discussion of Mike's book, A Billion Years, which explores the secret inner workings of the powerful Church of Scientology. Our author, Mike Rinder, was raised as a Scientologist from early childhood. He went on to serve as Scientology's international spokesperson and as the head of its Office of Special Affairs, and was a member of the board of directors of Church of Scientology International from its creation in 1983 until he left in 2007. Since renouncing Scientology, Rinder has become a prominent whistleblower against its abuses. He appeared in the HBO documentary Going Clear and co-hosted all 3 seasons of the Emmy Award-winning show Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath on A&E. He and Remini currently co-host the podcast Scientology Fair Game. Our moderator, Tony Ortega, is a journalist who was formerly the editor of The Village Voice. He has written about Scientology since 1995, and his book, The Unbreakable Miss Lovely, about Scientology's most infamous campaign of terror to destroy author Paulette Cooper, came out in May 2015. Now that I've made the proper introductions, I will once again say that if you have a specific question, you can post that directly into our Q&A section. I will try and turn the chat back on, and once I do, I'll be able to provide you with links to Mike's book, which you can purchase at our museum store or through our museum store. You can do it online as well. Please also note that you can click on live transcript to see live auto captioning of this event. And that's all from me. So please sit back and enjoy, and I will turn this over to Mike and Tony.
Hey.
Hey.
I see Mike Rinder.
I see Tony Ortega.
Just to let people know, I'm in New York. Mike, you're in Florida, right?
Yes, sir.
I have actually been to the Mark Twain house. I was very fortunate that I got to have a book event there.
Yeah, I saw that.
2015 for the Paulette Cooper book. A beautiful place, wonderful.
Oh, if I ever get to Connecticut, I am definitely going there because
Oh,
Mark Twain is one of my all-time favorites.
of course, just fantastic. Wonderful house. Well, listen, Mike, I've written about your book. It's absolutely terrific. It brings so much to the field of trying to understand Scientology and its controversies. I guess I want to start out by saying I hear from readers who send in questions to ask you invariably how someone can become so dedicated to, as you put it, 1 billion years in Scientology's elite inner core. But that's actually one of the things I like the most about your book is your ability to describe that mentality. So for people who have that question, you just need to read his book. He explains it so well. But what do you tell people who ask you that question? How can someone be sucked into an organization like this?
Gosh, it's such a hard question to answer effectively in a short amount of time, Tony. I had a great discussion with John Atek the day before yesterday, which will be coming out soon, about this very issue of what does it take to persuade someone to do things against their inherent nature, against even their best interest, which is what actually happens in these high control groups or cults like Scientology. You get persuaded by a sort of a combination of peer pressure, of authoritarian teaching, of hypnotism. John was really on a roll about that. And I think that he, perhaps more than anybody, really understands that subject. He has made a real study of it. And the problem of the control mechanisms that are used in Scientology to keep people from doubting or escaping. One thing being that, the words of L. Ron Hubbard cannot be questioned. So you're sort of stuck with you're 100% in, and if you're 100% in, which is the only way to be in Scientology, then you have to stick by the words of L. Ron Hubbard. The other thing is the threat of what you lose if you deviate and depart from Scientology. Family, perhaps your job, your relationships, and the idea that you are surrendering your eternity to a dark place of pain and suffering, whereas if you remain in Scientology, you will ultimately achieve full spiritual freedom. And so there are a lot of factors that go into it. And I and many others have said that the process is the old adage of boiling a frog. You start with small things, you find small things in Scientology. And like I've also said often, if everything in Scientology was complete shit, nobody would be involved. But Hubbard took things from all over the place that are sort of fundamental, innate truths or things that anybody can easily agree with, and presented those as the sort of hook to get people in, and then start adding, and pretty soon you're up to the point where you're believing in, hydrogen bombs and volcanoes 75 million years ago, and Xenu, and et cetera, et cetera. And that is that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And one other thing, Tony, which John and I talked about also, is the idea that it is very difficult once you have participated and committed and gotten other people to commit and given money and given time to turn around and say, oh, I was completely bamboozled. I was a fool. This was all just crap. And that sunk cost equation of I've already invested so much in this, and the fact that people don't like to admit being wrong is a big factor in keeping people in.
Right. Well, besides those ideas, I mean, Lawrence Wright put it very well. He called it a prison of belief. And you've described these ideas that were, kind of keeping people in. There's an actual organization, and it's got a history. And this is another thing that's just so great about your book. I was stunned at the scope of your book, at how much of Scientology's history that you were able to write about, but also that you personally witnessed. This is one of the most stunning things about your book, is you happen to be in the right place at the right time for virtually every important thing that happened to Scientology since the mid-60s. So as someone who has seen its fortunes rise and fall over the years, what are some of the important changes you've witnessed, and what's your assessment of Scientology's condition today?
Well, I guess, Tony, the most important, there are two significant changes in Scientology in my era. One, the death of L. Ron Hubbard. Probably the most significant, because it heralded in the era of David Miscavige. And, we can talk about that separately, and I cover a lot of detail about David Miscavige in my book. And I, fortunately or unfortunately, experienced both. I experienced both working with and for L. Ron Hubbard and working with and for David Miscavige. That was a massive change. It was a massive change in how Scientology sort of conducts itself. And some of that is based on, like, Scientology conducts itself based on the writings of L. Ron Hubbard. Let there be no mistake about that. But there is also, how do you interpret and implement the writings of L. Ron Hubbard? And David Miscavige is a much more ruthless, more ruthless. Yeah, it's hard to like, I don't want to paint Hubbard as being this goody two-shoes, nice guy.
Right.
But on the other hand, Scientology has become far more unbending and unchangeable, oddly, in the era of David Miscavige than it was in the era of Hubbard. Because Hubbard could actually turn around and say, nope, we're not doing that anymore, even if it was not true. But he could sort of adjust things if he wished. And Miscavige doesn't have that luxury. The second biggest change in Scientology is the IRS exemption. That has had massive impact and implications on Scientology, and not really for the reason that people most, like, the instant idea is, oh, well, they don't have to pay taxes, so they make a lot more money. No, that's not actually the issue with the exemption. The issue with the exemption is that they are now outside the purview of any government agency. The IRS typically has some ability to monitor the activities of organizations and how much money are they making and what are they spending it on. When you're designated a religious exempt organization, the IRS basically has no ability to get any information whatsoever. And this is a massive, massive problem, and a massive, massive vehicle or means by which Scientology is able to continue doing the abusive things that it does. It collects money that is tax-free, subsidized by you and me and everybody else who pays their taxes to the IRS, and pretends that it is collecting this money for these altruistic things that it claims it does, which are really just video PR propaganda ops, and spends that money hiring rafts of lawyers and private investigators and buying websites and paying for Google ads to smear people like you and me and anybody else who ever says anything bad about Scientology, hiring PIs to hack you and me, and that guy ultimately getting convicted. This is bizarre, but the government and the IRS appears to be incapable of doing anything about it. They're really not. They just don't have the motivation to do anything about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the problem also is they're looking for some public outcry, maybe some movements among the, some popular outrage. And, a reaction I often see, and I know you do too, is the person who says that all religions have problems. Why should we care about Scientology and its crazy beliefs? All religions have crazy beliefs. So what? How do you, you and I both get that. How do you answer that?
I answer it by saying, well, anybody can believe anything they want. Crazy beliefs is a meaningless thing. Yeah, you're right. Everybody has crazy beliefs. It's what you do that counts. And there is no other religious organization that has a dedicated intelligence branch to hire private investigators and smear people. That's just not what's done. As wacky as some of these other organizations and even religious organizations are, and the horrendous things that they do and spend money like Saudi princes and have jets and tell people that they're going to make them wealthy if they just send their last $10, et cetera, et cetera. That I firmly believe that should not be going on, and that is abusive. But that is a different level than directly destroying families.
Mm-hmm.
Hiring private investigators to go around and harass people, literally, hiring lawyers to threaten and keep people silent. And that's what the difference is with Scientology. It is not like a few or even institutionalized abuses by priests in the Catholic Church. If you take the Catholic Church, and nobody should misinterpret my comments here as being in any way favoring the abuses of the Catholic Church. I'm on the board of Child USA, and that is our thing, is stopping that. But the percentage of activity of the Catholic Church that is that sort of reprehensible child abuse, sexual abuse, et cetera, even though it seems big, is tiny compared to the overall size and activities of the Catholic Church. You go to Scientology, it is a big part of Scientology. It is an institutionalized part. It is not wayward people who ultimately have to be, thrown out because they're bad. This is the people who are the top of the heap, who are doing this stuff pursuant to the policies of L. Ron Hubbard. And that's what's different about Scientology.
Right. Mike, one of the really remarkable things about the book is the way you frame it with your open letter you've written to your two grown children, Taryn and Benjamin. I've watched them for years be used by Scientology to attack you in social media. It's just heartbreaking. Can you tell us what Scientology has done about your book since it came out?
Not much, honestly, Tony. It's been pretty ineffectual. They got this open letter. They constructed some open letter from Taryn and Benjamin, and it's kind of bizarre because it basically accuses me of being a bad parent. But that's what the book is. It's talking about, I was not a not a good parent. I was a Sea Org member. This is not how you should raise your children. Don't do what I did. It's bad. It's rotten. It's terrible. You know, David Miscavige, like, it's funny. David Miscavige, he had a lawyer send a letter like the day before the book was actually going on sale saying, you have to stop the publication of this. Like, it's already out in all the bookstores. I mean, they got delivered last week. You think they're going to stop now?
Right.
And his only thing that he complained about in the entire book was claiming that the incident with Ted Koppel and his assault on the producer of Nightline was a lie. That's it. And so,
but you were there.
Of course I was there, and so was Marty Rathbun. And, you know, Marty Rathbun will probably now say that it never happened, but, you know, it certainly happened, and it was certainly eye-opening. And, but of all the things that I talk about in the book and all the things that I say, that is the one thing that was really objectionable. I mean, they sent a bunch of other letters, you know, well, you know, Taryn attended public school in Los Angeles in 19 something or other for 6 months. And, you know, you said she never really went to school, you know, like those sort of little details that I know, I like I said, right in the author's note at the beginning, they've got a record of every day of minute of my life. They have files that say where I was, where did I travel to, what was I doing, what, like, everything. What was I thinking about? My OW write-ups, like every sec check, blah, 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 blah. They've got all of this. And, you know, they had, as soon as they knew that a book was coming out, they had a team sit down and put together a complete time track of every place I was, everywhere, so that when I say, well, I saw David Miscavige in Madrid and blah, 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 they're going to go, well, he only arrived there on the 19th of March, and you said it was the you was the 18th. And, you know, I expected that. And honestly, compared to the letters that they sent about the aftermath every week, they were pretty weak. They're just sort of like, yeah, okay, whatever. Yeah, okay. I'll correct it in the next edition. I don't care. I want it to be accurate too. If it's inaccurate about X, Y, or Z, I'll just make it so that it's accurate. It's not going to change the story. It's not going to change what happened to me or what I experienced. The funniest thing though, Tony, which I am in the process of writing an afterword now for the trade paperback edition.
Okay,
so I'm going to cover some of this stuff in there, but the funniest one was Humphrey's lawyer in the UK, Humphrey Hunter, who published your book and published my book in the UK and other English-speaking places, has this wonderful lawyer there. And, you know, just because of the weird way the laws work over there, he insisted that we have to write a letter putting them on notice. I was like, okay. He sent me a copy of the letter that went to David Miscavige's lawyer. And it basically says, look, this book is coming out and we would like Mr. Miscavige to respond to the following 4 points. One, and I'm going to paraphrase this because I'm not going to get it exactly right. One, he is a foul-mouthed and abusive person to those around him. 2, he has physically assaulted people. 3, he has caused his wife to disappear or something. And 4, he is insane. Please respond. No response.
No response.
No response.
And, you know, that's funny that when you say that last one, for years, when new people come out who have been driven away, even though they were very dedicated Scientologists and they reliably gave tons and tons of money, Miscavige would drive them away because of his policies and that kind of thing. And I would ask them, well, why is Miscavige driving away the people that have been so loyal to him for so long? And every single time, Mike, that's their answer. He's insane.
That's true. It's true. But that insanity is, based on the characteristics of a sociopath. Like, I say repeatedly over and over, everybody that I can ever get to listen to me, read this book by Martha Stout, The Sociopath Next Door, because it's absolutely brilliant. But when you have someone who has only their own self-interest in mind, and that is all that matters to them. Consequences don't matter. The feelings of other people don't matter. Only what they perceive is good for them matters. Then you see things like that happening. The people that could be important and supportive and helpful to whatever it is that he's trying to get done are chewed up and spit out because they're not important, because only he's important. There's a wonderful thing that Nancy Saltzman says in The Vow Part 2, where she's talking about Keith Raniere, and she said, I loved him. I loved him. And I thought he loved me. And I finally realized there is only one person he loves, himself.
Right.
And that is the realization that everybody needs to have about dealing with a sociopath. That is the only thing that matters. And as much as you try to project your own empathy or your own conscience onto sociopaths, it's difficult to understand, and they seem completely insane. And I guess they really are completely insane because they do things that are self-destructive, and that's pretty insane.
Well, and I think one institution that really hasn't come to grips with this, at least from my observation, is the US court system. Just doesn't seem to understand that Scientology is not acting in good faith ever, and is always lying to them. Mike, what's it going to take for these judges to start treating David Miscavige for the sociopath that he is?
Gosh, Tony, I wish I knew the answer to that. It's like beating your head against a brick wall coming into contact with Scientology in the litigation arena. My view is, and I've always maintained this view, the world of legal is the wrong venue to take on Scientology. Because at least in the United States, when you get into either criminal or civil court, he who has the most money has the scales tipped in their favor.
Right.
And they don't always prevail, but if you got more money and can hire more lawyers and get the brightest, best legal minds on your team, you have a much greater chance of success than the other side. So,
well, and you were running these attorneys at one time. I mean, were these discussions like in the open with you and Miscavige about what's the best lie we can tell in court, or what's the best strategy to snow the judge? I mean, what were you telling these attorneys?
Basically, it's your job to win no matter what, and no matter what you have to do, and no matter how much it costs. And that is the modus operandi of Scientology in the legal arena. It's win at all costs. And if you can't win, deplete the opposition of all resources and ability to fight, because we can last longer than they can.
Right.
And that war of attrition strategy has worked extremely successfully for Scientology for a very, very long time. But as I was saying, the two places where I believe Scientology has the greatest vulnerability is first in the public relations arena, or now media. It is, the world has changed since the days of the Truth Rundown, when that was a sort of And your original, very early reporting back at the Orange County, whatever that was.
New Times, Los Angeles. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. New Times, Los Angeles. Well, it was in Orange County. The world has changed, and the ability of Scientology to intimidate the media has gone on a toboggan downhill slide for a long time. And, you know, they threatened the Tampa Bay Times and did nothing. They threatened HBO and did nothing. They threatened Vanity Fair and did nothing. They threatened the LA Times. I mean, everybody has been threatened. They threatened us every week on the Aftermath and did nothing. And when you have that happening, and you add to that the ability of people to now access information on the internet, they can go to your blog, they can go to Wikipedia, they can go to any news source, they can go anywhere they want and find out what the real truth is. Those two things combined are killers of, and ultimately will be what results in the death of Scientology. It won't happen just because of that. Those things then influence political people. And we have for a long time been waiting for any real politician to stand up and say, you know what, Scientology sucks and it needs to be taken down. Nobody has ever wanted to say that. In all the time that I have been around, there has never, in the US, there's been plenty in Germany and France and other places, and Australia with
Right.
Nick Xenophon.
Nick Xenophon, right.
But not here. It was too hot a subject for anybody to take on. And now, finally, things are changing. And the LA mayoral race is the sort of canary in the coal mine. That started something that I know is going to be continued. I know that sooner or later, a federal politician is going to realize that there is political currency to be had out of taking on Scientology. It's no longer just a lose-lose proposition. I could be the guy that stands up and does something about this. And when you see Jared Carmichael cracking a joke about Shelley Miscavige on the Golden Globes, and you see, this stuff coming up more and more and more, sooner or later, someone is going to get wise. And when that happens, that is what will result in the IRS taking action, because they will get political pressure to do so. That,
Right.
There are two things that motivates the IRS: stories in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times, and political pressure. And the latter is far more effective than the former.
Right. One of my personal favorite episodes in your story, and you start telling it, I think right in the first sentence, is that, you escaped one day in 2007, right, in London,
Mm-hmm.
and you had a BlackBerry with you. And it contained texts that had been sent to you by David Miscavige, and you ended up turning those over in a court case, and they're now official court record. What do those texts reveal about Miscavige and what it was like to work for him?
The depravity and the vulgarity and the sort of sick, sadistic pleasure of literally torturing people, mentally torturing them. I don't mean sitting them down in a chair and driving a screwdriver through their fingers. I mean, like, mentally abusing and torturing someone. And certainly, I originally, John Sweeney put those in his book. I had given them to the FBI. It wasn't in a court case. I gave them to the FBI when they asked me for that. Those texts are a sort of a little window into the mind and the way that David Miscavige looks at people around him and how to treat them. And it's very revealing. I mean, I remember when John first read those, he was like, oh my God. Oh my. And he didn't have a very high opinion of David Miscavige, believe me. He called him the thumping pope of Scientology. He was like really, really intent upon exposing this guy. But when he saw those, it was like, this is beyond anything that I could have imagined. And just because, you know, he didn't object, there was no lawyer letter about those texts. Those texts have been published all over the place, and the YSCOHB has become almost a you know, a thing of folklore at this point.
Right.
And he's never objected to that.
Yeah.
never complained that you're slander and libeling me or libeling me with these things, because they're right from the phone. So yeah, they're pretty remarkable.
Yeah, you're forgetting. The reason I have them is Ray Jeffrey entered him in Monique's case. That's
oh
my
yeah, that's true.
That's what I was
true.
referring to, is that, yeah, it was so remarkable to see them all sitting there in the court file, and just to see the way David Miscavige actually speaks to his employees. Just amazing, because they set up websites and they put out press releases. They're always trying to portray him as basically the Pope of Scientology, who never thinks anything except for the ecclesiastical matters of the church and never gets his hands dirty. But, you know, with those texts and what you've written in the book, you describe a guy that's a complete micromanager, that's ruling over every aspect of this massive movement around the world. He is ruthless, and he keeps his hands on everything. Is that right?
Absolutely, Tony. And part of the reason why Scientology is dwindling and cannot move forward is that he has to approve everything that happens. Like what color the fucking carpet is in an ideal org. I mean, literally. Yeah. So these things back up and back up and back up, and that, you know, submissions, endless submissions sent to COB to get approval to do anything. And basically the organization is sort of frozen, waiting for approval and blessing from the COB before anything can happen. And so not much happens.
Mm. You had to escape. And you described a little earlier, one of the things that makes it so difficult to escape is the mental conditioning. What can you offer as advice to parents who want their children to leave Scientology, or friends that know somebody and they want to say the right thing that gets the motors turning? What do you say to people that ask you that question?
Funny, someone sent me an email tonight and I was answering it right before this. It comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And honestly, I wish I had a really good answer that will, like, that was an easy one shot clear, in the words of L. Ron Hubbard, that would work. I tell people, look, don't argue with them about what's obviously wrong. Try and get them to adopt some things that Hubbard said to open the door to getting them to look beyond the world of Scientology. Because Hubbard said basically everything about everything, so you can always find a good quote that's sort of suitable for whatever the moment is. And
Right.
two of his best are look, don't listen, and what's true for you is what's true for you.
Right.
And that if you can use Hubbard's words to open the door to people to, hey, you know, doesn't Hubbard say that you should look, not listen? Like, you don't just listen to what Scientology is telling you. you should look and see what's going on. Like, why don't you look and see if there's any people in your local Scientology organization? Like, go and look, go and see. Is there anybody there? Is the much vaunted expansion of Scientology really happening, or is it not? And if not, why not? Why don't you do a Google search? Don't search websites, search news sites. Go and search Google News and just put in the word Scientology and see if you see all the reports about the wonderful good works being done by Scientology all over the world that the IAS is sponsoring. You will never find anything. You will find maybe a press release every now and then, but you will not find any stories. And, Scientologists will say, well, that's just because they're all the chaos merchants. They're not going to report good news because they're just merchants of chaos. Well, then go look up the Red Cross and see whether there are any stories about the Red Cross and what they do. Or, the people that provide food, that chef that provides food for victims of natural disasters. See if there's any media coverage on that. That would be the best advice that I have. And the second thing that I would say is to tell people, look, I will always be here for you. If you need anything, I am here. I don't care what the circumstances are. I will help you under any circumstances, anytime. You just have to reach out to me and I will be here for you. Because the idea that when you leave Scientology, the outside world is going to eat you alive is very, very prevalent and is pushed very, very hard in Scientology, that the WOG world is a horrible place to be in. You wouldn't want to be left alone in the WOG world without Scientology. And so that, I think, is sort of the second important thing.
Well, and you when you say that, it reminds me that one of the things that was really new for me with your book was that period after you first came out. What was it like to leave a Sea Org after many, many, many years and try to readapt to a world you weren't that familiar with? And I just found that fascinating. The people that were helping you out, the people that you met, the jobs you took. What were some of the toughest things about that trend? Before you talked to the Tampa Bay Times and became somebody that was known for speaking out about Scientology, what were some of the tougher things for you as someone just trying to adapt again to a world outside of Scientology?
Tony, I think that the toughest thing was the idea that it was okay to do nothing. It was really, really hard. I remember Tom DeVock when I first, because he was the first person that I went to, and he was living in Kissimmee at the time near Orlando. And I arrived there and he said, just chill, man, just chill. Go rent a whole bunch of movies at Blockbuster and just watch them. Everything you haven't seen, just sit around. Don't think you have to do. I felt like I was doing something terrible by not doing anything, and that I couldn't stop. I couldn't relax. I was being unproductive, and being unproductive is being out ethics. And like these, as crazy as that sounds, that was probably the hardest thing for me to adjust to. Like when I started working selling cars, I was working 7 days a week. Everybody else works 5, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, I don't have anything else. I got to work. And I would come in at, 10 o'clock in the morning and leave at 10 o'clock at night every day. And they're like, who is this guy? This is like weird. And I'm like, oh, this is easy. I don't know what to do with myself between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. Like I'm used to sleeping 4 hours a night. Like what the? So that took some real adjustment, that it's okay to not be frantically trying to save the world or frantically doing everything you can to prove that you really are productive and you're not engaged in out ethics by sitting around lazy doing nothing. And that took some time. You know, also, it's hard to, at least in the beginning, to separate your thoughts and ideas and perceptions of things from what you've learned in Scientology versus reality. And that takes some real time and some real, you know, people talk about peeling the onion and, you know, getting rid of these layers of concepts that you may have taken as being, you know, this is just true, you know, all gays are one, you know, suppressive, borderline suppressive, blah, 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 blah. Like how, and there are thousands of these things because
Right.
obviously Scientology is very, very all encompassing. Hubbard covered everything. So you have ideas about everything, and it's very difficult to begin with to tell, is this am I seeing the world through the Hubbard colored glasses, or am I seeing the world as
Right.
it really is? And that takes some considerable adjustment.
Let me see if I can get one more in before Omar comes in with the audience questions. I know this was not your focus, but of course people are curious. Scientology used to wield a lot of influence in Hollywood, but these days I've lost count of the shows that use Scientology as the butt of a joke, right? Can you talk a little bit about the changes that you've witnessed of Scientology's fortunes and influence in Hollywood?
Oh, it's dramatically diminished. I mean, think about it, Tony. There hasn't been a big new Scientology celebrity in probably 20 years, and I'm not even sure who the last one was. The only person who has emerged as a Scientologist and is a seriously big name influential person is Lizzie Moss. And she was raised a Scientologist. She didn't come into Scientology to forward her career,
Right.
you know, at the Beverly Hills Playhouse or wherever the usual recruitment lines used to be to try and get new celebrities. You see now far less deference, and the only person that still has any clout is Tom Cruise, and frankly, his clout is dependent upon whatever his last movie was, and his last movie basically saved Paramount, and many people say saved the movie industry. So he's riding high right now. But if his next movie is a bomb, and he's had plenty of bombs in the last 10 years too, if his next movie is a bomb, he's going to be forgotten like yesterday's edition of the paper. He will become irrelevant, and the world of Hollywood will move on, and Scientology will have lost its last sort of remaining influential person. But of course, everybody knows now he doesn't talk about Scientology anymore. He forbids people to ask him about Scientology.
Right.
So he's no longer the guy that is out there jumping on Oprah's couch talking about the wonders of Scientology or attacking Matt Lauer because he believes CCHR actually knows what it's talking about. He's now focused on trying to be a successful movie star and maintain that position. So yeah, the world or the days of Scientology's influence in Hollywood are waning very quickly.
Especially when you see something like the Kaminsky method and somebody like, I'm sorry for forgetting the name of the writer, Chuck Lorre. Basically, I mean, the dialogue he wrote was just uncanny.
That was brilliant.
Because he had been a Scientologist and he knew, and so now even former Scientologists are unafraid to put these hilarious Scientology jokes in their shows because it just, I remember talking to other people that had worked in the industry earlier, and they said everyone was terrified. You would never mention Scientology on a show because you didn't know who was listening.
Right. Exactly. Well, those days happily are over.
I guess I thought Omar was going to come in, but so what about, do you have some big media events coming up, Mike, that we should know about?
Big media events? No.
No, nothing like that. I was so
No.
fortunate. I actually got to have dinner with you the day your book came out. I don't know
Right.
how I got that lucky, but
Yeah.
you were in New York and I happened to
was
come down.
Serendipity.
It was serendipity, a lot of fun.
It was.
I think Omar's coming back now. Are you coming back, Omar, to there he is.
Yeah, I'm back. So we have a lot of questions. We have probably over 30 questions, so we are not going to get to all of them, unfortunately. And I'm sure a lot of them are covered in the book. So I'm going to try and pick out ones that might be a little bit more interesting. There was one that sounded pretty interesting because for a lot of us, we're totally out of the scope of this, but what changes do you see coming in LA after the mayoral election and Scientology being part of both candidates' races for the position?
Well, I see the LAPD being reined in with their, soft shoe shuffle with Scientology. I do not believe that the new mayor and probably anybody else in the city of Los Angeles is going to be too tolerant of the LAPD cozying up to Scientology, taking their checks or putting, kiosks in the Hollywood LAPD precinct. I firmly believe that that is the case. I have had talks with Karen Bass. She reached out to me as I put on my blog, and I think Tony mentioned on his, after the issue that originally came up with her, and she wanted to get herself educated on Scientology, and credit to her, she reached out to try and get educated, and then she watched Aftermath and she did various other things. And I really don't think that she appreciated the fact that she was basically taken advantage of. And when you have someone like that who has recognized that that Scientology in some way took advantage of them, they are not your friend forever.
And let me just, for those of us on the East Coast that maybe aren't familiar with what happened, the LA politicians tend to be very friendly with Scientology, but the two people running for mayor, the one, Rick Caruso, they're both Democrats, but Rick Caruso attacked his opponent, Karen Bass, by pointing out that she had once given a speech at a Scientology event. She then came back and made it very clear that she no longer has anything to do with Scientology and was denouncing Scientology. So it became a contest between two candidates trying to outdo each other with what negative things they could say about Scientology. And I can tell you, for people in Los Angeles, it was amazing because, again, most politicians stay either way away or they cozy up to Scientology. So to see both candidates attacking Scientology, and of course, Scientology then reacted with a very expensive media campaign. They flooded the LA market with these, slick videos about we're the most important part of Los Angeles. It was really something, and I think it's left behind this real big question now about the Scientology status in the city and what Karen Bass can do as the new mayor.
We have received some questions about Clearwater and their police department. And also a lot of questions about Miscavige himself. The disappearance of Shelley is a big question. Any idea what really happened there? Where she could be at this moment?
Well, yes. Omar, that's something that's covered in the book. It's been covered extensively by Tony on his blog. It's, I wrote about it just last week on her birthday. And yes, she was disappeared to another Scientology property owned by the Church of Spiritual Technology in San Bernardino County because she displeased her husband and he thought that she was being disloyal to him, and I believe also was a potential threat to his power. And she has been held incommunicado at that property since then with handlers and minders and security guards and private investigators. You know, I even went up there. Tony went up there with 60 Minutes from Australia. I went up there as part of the aftermath. The PIs pop out of the bushes taking your picture. If you just drive by the place, it is almost certainly where she is, because there's no reason to have her anywhere else, because that is about as secure a location as you can get, and it's relatively accessible to Los Angeles if need be. And I have a lot of speculation about what Shelley's mindset is, based on my own mindset when I was in that position.
Right.
And I think that, charitably, she is trying to be loyal to L. Ron Hubbard and what she believes is the legacy of L. Ron Hubbard. And it is my belief that she is waiting for L. Ron Hubbard to come back to free her.
Mm. Wow.
So there you go. That's the Shelley story in a nutshell.
Nutshell, right.
Thank you. Someone else has also asked, is there any information on likely successors to Miscavige? He seems to be really gripping to power there, but eventually someone has to take over. Someone else has to take over. So any ideas on that?
Look, I have said this, people ask this all the time also. He has emasculated everybody else at the highest echelons of Scientology. So all of the people who were the obvious, successors in waiting have been disappeared. It's not just Sally Miscavige that's disappeared. It's Mark Yeager and Ray Midoff and Norman Starkey and Mark Ingber, and the list goes on. Everybody who was ever anybody in Scientology has either escaped or has been disappeared. But as I also said, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And if David Miscavige was to have a heart attack tomorrow and die, whoever the least jellyfishy of those who remain will come out as is the new guy. And it will be Mark Yeager or Norman Starkey or Guillaume Leserve or Ray Midoff or one of those people who is recognized by at least, the old-time Scientologists, because they haven't been seen in public for a long time now. But nevertheless, they were people who worked with L. Ron Hubbard and have some cred in the Scientology world. So one of them will come out and will become the de facto leader of this crumbling empire that will fall to pieces.
Do you think there's kind of a Praetorian Guard in the attorneys like Monique Yingling and the others, that they would anoint one of those people to make sure that the control is kept with somebody that they trust?
I think so, Tony, but I don't think that those things are really any different. I think that those people that I named are the people that Monique knows, or Eric Lieberman knows, or any of the other attorneys who've been around forever. They all know them, and so they would see them as the most likely people. There is also a possibility that if tomorrow David Miscavige was to have a heart attack, the person who would emerge would be Shelley.
Interesting.
If he was no longer around and she came back, all of those people would address her as the person in charge.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that just occurred to me.
Yeah.
I've been asked this question numerous times, and I always answer it sort of basically the same way. And then it suddenly occurred to me, hey, wait, if Miscavige wasn't here tomorrow, Shelley would suddenly be the person.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I remember there was an executive that left 7 or 8 years ago, but he's the most recent that we know of that was very, very high up, Paul Burkhart, and he had access to the international records, and he could see day to day who was running Scientology in Los Angeles. And I asked him, who's, with all these people you mentioned, Mike, in the prison, who's running things under Dave? Because, somebody's got to, be dealing with the details. And he said it was a woman named Carrie Ibert. I thought, well, who's that? He's down to a nobody that nobody's heard of. And who knows who would step up to be number 2 to take over? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be Carrie Ibert.
No.
None of those people, like all of those people, even though they disappeared, consider themselves so far senior and superior to Carrie Ibert that it's not funny. To the outside world and the guys in Los Angeles, Carrie Ibert, who at the time was the commanding officer of the Commodore's Messenger Org IXU, the international, I can't even remember what that stands for. Thank God. She was a big fish in LA, but compared to the people at INT, she's a nobody.
Interesting.
Interesting. So we'll end with a final question. What can those of us who are in various parts of the country and the world, what can we do to help members who are leaving or trying to leave, or be part of this effort?
That's a great question, Omar. Thank you for asking, because my book details what I went through, and many people after me, and we had to resort to finding and connecting to former members of the Sea Org to help us. And so a number of us got together and created a foundation called the Aftermath Foundation. And we are dedicated to helping people who are trying to and have escaped Scientology. And there is an enormous amount of good work that has been done. We have helped a lot of people now, and some of these stories are pretty astonishing. Ultimately, that will probably become its own TV show. The stories of those who have come out of Scientology. But you can go to the aftermathfoundation.org website and volunteer or donate. We have a big now database of people who have put forth their name to be able to assist someone. Go pick them up at the airport, or pick them up at their local Scientology organization with their bag in their hand and drive them to the airport, or give them a job, or help them with somewhere to stay, or whatever it is that's needed. So that is the thing that people can do directly like that. The thing that everybody can do regardless is keep bringing this up with your elected officials. Keep writing to them. If you ever get the opportunity to see them, it doesn't even matter what level you're at. It doesn't matter if it's a local politician. It doesn't matter if it's a federal politician. Anybody who hears more about the abuses going on in Scientology and the fact that they have exempt status and that they use their exempt money that you are subsidizing. Remember, you have an issue, a bone to pick with the government of the United States about Scientology. Your tax dollars are supporting their abusive activities. And so that is something that everybody can do.
Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you so much, Tony. This has been a really amazing conversation. I'm just going to reach over here to show the book here. And please buy Mike's book. You can do so through our museum store. And of course, you can join us again for future free virtual programs here at the Mark Twain House. I can tell you about a couple of upcoming ones. You can join us for the Midnight Kingdom with Jared Sexton, where he'll explore the abuses of the powerful. And this is the powerful, like in the big picture, on Thursday, January 26th at 7 p.m. And you can also join us for State on Freedom, where Dr. Dan Berger will explore the Black Power movement on Tuesday, January 31st at 7. Thanks again, Mike. Thank you so much for being here.
You're
And
very
thanks-
welcome. Thank you for having me. I hope someday that I can come and visit in person.
Yes, definitely. We will definitely have you here and give you a tour of our house. Well, thank you all for joining us and have a great evening.
Thank you, Omar.
Bye now.